Sweet.
Cool, should be live now. So welcome everyone to our current September PHP meetup. We've got a fun one tonight, like we said. ZA grown PHP framework and working with PestPHP. You can ask any questions you'd like, and Andre will get to them throughout or towards the end or whenever it feels like it, because we're free like that around here. Yeah. So without further ado, let's go.
Cool. Hope you guys can see my screen. Good evening to everyone who's attending. It's great to be able to show off some of the things and maybe give us a little bit of a history lesson. Well, it's definitely been a bit of nostalgia from my side. You know, just looking back at where I started and where the things came from. The whole origin of wanting to write a framework, it wasn't something that I set out to do, but it came of necessity. I'm actually a Delphi developer, so very used to things being object orientated and having a compiler and things like that, and then having to get into the web development. And at this stage was way before we had the source revisioning and things like that. We had things like source safe, where you'd have to physically check files in, and that was one of the things that used to frustrate me, especially with PHP development, is that you would have to upload files to the web server just to see if your code was working, or you'd have to run a web server inside your local machine and things like that. And computers at that point weren't that powerful to do the things. And I came up with this concept of actually having an editor inside the browser. And this editor was menu driven, and it actually allowed a person to go and code online. So little things like we might take for granted now, like this little diff and things like here shows me the difference between the code that I've changed. But essentially the whole framework thing started as a way to take and unify, common things that we've always been working with, for example, global functions and things like that. PHP hadn't really reached the stage where it was, object orientated, and we didn't have Composer at that point. Most people didn't even, or Git didn't exist, and most people didn't even know what concurrent source versioning was. So this was a way that I could have a web server up and running, and I could go in and change code and actually have versioning built into the system. And I must say this way of working, I mean, it might seem a little bit strange nowadays, with our nice IDEs and things that we have, like PHP Storm on the left here. But this was pretty much where we used to live and do the development. Some of the, just going back to some of the commits or changes here, I can actually see who was working on the programs and things like that. That then led to, having a look at, even making this online editor even better. And again, didn't even have routing and things like that we do now with Ajax calls and things like that. Actually went in with having a look at how we work with we called them interfaces, but essentially you'd have a development interface and a public interface, and we're actually coding this development library inside the browser. So you'd actually be able to change how this thing looks from within your web browser. So that was the initial beginnings of the framework. Some of the guys who work with me or remember this would tell you that it was very possible, for one of the guys to break something while you're busy with, because we even had the ability here to modify things. Well, two people could be working on the same piece of code at the same time, and actually save changes real time, which would then I didn't get all the bugs sorted out on the actual diffs on this. So you could hit update here, it would actually fire an Ajax request up to the server and modify the code and deploy it. Now, obviously, this isn't ideal if you think of what we're doing on a daily basis now, where you have a nice IDE which has all your code checks built in. I mean, you really had to know your PHP here to code, and I mean, structure was very, very important. So I mean, these are the things where you really get to know your PHP language. When you start coding in a browser with no real help, all you've got really is a syntax highlighter, and you have your structures to work with. So that's essentially where it began. There were some neat little things in here. You could actually have your SCSS compiled for you on the fly. So you would be editing that over here, and you would then allow it to render to the page, and it would change real time while you're working. So there were things like we did like that to make mobile development and styling and things like that easy. And essentially that then led to what I call the first Tina 4 release, where the whole development profile changed to something of what you might be familiar with in a Laravel or a Cake PHP and things like that. So let me go over some of the basics here, and then I definitely would like to hear from you guys, maybe ask some questions and see where we're at. Tina 4 stands for "This is not a framework." Okay, so that might be a bit strange. We're talking about a homegrown framework, but it's not a framework. The whole idea with Tina 4 is that it should allow the developer to be free, to be able to work in a way that suits them. Now, that isn't always ideal if you're working in a team, but if you're a single developer and you want to get things done, the whole idea was that Tina 4 should actually enhance and give you that freedom to work as you see fit and to get the things out. So some of the things that happened, or some of the concepts that were definitely close to my heart, was object oriented. The fact that you could compile code and things like that's we haven't had really in PHP unless you start having a look at far files. And that's something that the new framework is also able to do. You're able to compile to a far file and then distribute that as a runnable, which then makes the deployments lighter. Obviously, code reuse, that's something that we look at today if we're using best practices like Composer and things like that. But the frameworks these days, I mean, they are pretty packing a whole lot of tools into them. And I mean, yes, you can keep adding your Composer libraries and things like that for reuse. But I mean, again, for me, some of those things seem to get a bit bloated, and it becomes very technical. And you don't always know the whole framework, and it's a lot of looking at documentation and things like that, which does make things difficult if you just want to code something and remember it. And that's why I started with these sort of characters on the framework, which would have names referring to what they were doing. Like Ruth, for example, would be to do roots. And Cody would be doing some code stuff, some defaults or some CRUD generation or things like that, even Ajax handling. So there's quite a neat Ajax handler inside the Tina 4 stack. Kim, to do templates and things like that. One of the things that's changed now is I've had a look. Even though Tina 4 has got its built-in template handler, I've leaned towards including Twig into the things just to make it easier. And obviously the documentation and things are there, so that someone who knows Twig, can get up and running very fast. And then Debbie, database handling. This Debbie came from one of the first open source projects that I did, was cross database engine for PHP, and that was back when no one had really decided if they were going to use PDO or whether they were going to use the native drivers and things like that. So essentially, I wrote a database abstraction which will allow you to pretty much connect to any database you can think of. And it simplified, the things that were happening. So a lot of my background has just been in trying to make life easier for people and to make things work from a simple perspective. I think keep it simple, stupid is probably the best way to have a look at what's trying to be achieved here. We went over the browser-based editing and all those things. Cross-platform, yeah, that's a difficult one. Something it's a bit of a bugbear for me, because cross-platform isn't always like it. I find often that things are working on my Mac or on my Linux machine, but then all of a sudden you put them over to Windows and give someone the tool to work with, and all of a sudden the command line things are not working as they should. So this is definitely something that I'm going to strive for, and this is to make it really a true cross-platform framework, if I want to use that word, but a tool that you can definitely rely on across all the platforms. So what are the core ideals of Tina 4? Well, my thoughts are that PHP should be actually the hero of this story. So it's more about focusing on the PHP code and doing things in a good way. So developers should be free to code, and obviously I'm definitely promote using a good IDE. There's a lot of stuff that you can eliminate with just having a good IDE, which is telling you what's going on with your code. And then something one of my mentors told me, he said, the best code that you write is a code you don't have to. So, I mean, if you're using a framework that you are used to, and you finding that you're writing less code because you're using that framework, I would say then, stick to that, because that just means that there's less for you to debug, there's less that can cause errors and things like that. And then I definitely believe in the whole open source philosophy, sharing is caring, open source, make the stuff available for other people to use and to benefit from, because at the end of the day, you're going to get a lot back in return. I think not just on knowledge, but just in generosity from many people. And then the other thing with Tina 4 is I think it's maybe a barrier remover. It should be a tool that allows a graphic designer to get into coding, to start off with maybe just basic twig templating, and then growing into a programmer, or just being able to do that job well, reusing code and reusing templates and things like that. So that's the essence of what's trying to be achieved here. I don't think Tina is something that's going to replace anything, or become something that it's not supposed to be. I think there's a lot of effort that goes into it, and it's definitely for me an enjoyment to work through the things and see how things work. So much more than just getting it out there for people to use. I think it's also a learning experience, and when you start digging into the code, I think even if you're a novice developer, you start seeing how things are put together. So what do you need to run Tina 4? Well, at least 7.1 and above. I'm definitely leaning towards the fact that I don't want to have too much legacy with the things, and that version might even increase, as we go on the things. I definitely think you should have Xdebug and Composer running, because without Composer, you're not really going to enjoy, working with the PHP community and as a whole, and you're not going to be able to install Tina 4 right off the bat easily, if you're going to grab the repository. So good thing is to have your PHP binary in your path. Now that might be obvious for Mac or for Linux, but obviously in Windows, you need to put that, global, so that your terminals and things will see that. I recommend, or must-haves would be some good IDE. Now I know a lot of you like Visual Studio Code, nothing wrong with that. make sure you have your debugging and things installed. And then essentially your composer install will bring the framework to your desktop. Are there any questions now? Do you want me to carry on? Is there anyone who wants to ask something?
There will be a bit of a stream delay, so
Yeah.
I think for now we can keep going.
Okay, so I'll wait for the questions to come in, but then let's have a look at the basics here. This is what I showed you before on the screens here. Was obviously the older versions of the framework. What we do have here is a built-in a web server using obviously PHP's built-in web server as the basis, but then with some enhancements, having the ability to serve out files from your project without having to have a Docker or some type of virtualization or things like that. So that for me was one of the things that I wanted to really make it easy to get started with. So essentially, if you have a look at the README file, it tells you about your composer install. And then you run a web server literally with your PHP using the -S switch. So localhost over there is going to run a web server on port 7878, and I'm going to point it to my index file. In my index file, I've got a few things here which I was fiddling around with before the session. But essentially, all you actually need over here is just a require of your auto load, okay, and you need to echo out the Tina for PHP. That's the framework or the library. So you just need those 2 lines of code to get started. Okay, so we're going to give this a spin. Let's run that. And then I'm hoping that this will open up in my browser to the right. Let's have a look. Okay, so that is what I expect. The 404 not found because we haven't done anything with the framework. I'm hoping you're seeing all of this debugging running up here on my command line. And that's giving me information about what's happening, what's been loaded, you know, whether the routes have been validated, where my templates and things are sitting, which files have been run, and things like that. A lot of information here. Off the bat, Tina 4 creates for you an env file. That's part of best practice. If you didn't know that, or you don't use an env file, I recommend looking into this. But essentially, she sets herself on debug mode right on the offset. So as you can see over here, debug true is obviously spinning out all this information at the bottom here. Once I've got this going, I mean, it's what's next. Well, if you are someone who wants to do templates or twig templates, there's nothing that you have to do from this point. You can actually just go straight to your templates folder, and you can actually create a twig template. Now, if you happen to name this template index.twig, and you put a big hello world in here, which is normally what everyone does, and we refresh our web browser screen, we're going to get our hello world. So there was 2 lines of code that I had to put in, and I was able to go and create a twig file, which then has got all the abilities of twig, as you would expect, the ability to include other twig files in it. I mean, we could have a look at including this one. So this is obviously not a twig session, but all of the things are actually wired in for you so that you can get cracking. So I'm thinking of a graphic designer who wants to get a website up and working very fast. This would be a quick way to do it. And he would be able to reuse and extend, off a template or something like that. Okay. What about the people who want to do an API? That's definitely something that I built this framework for, was that I wanted to do APIs in a quick way. Well, we've got a couple of folders here. This is obviously the structure, because if we're working with a framework, you need some structure. but there's no real rules about whether you should have these folders there. They're created for you by default, but you don't need to run with them. You can actually override them. Assets is sort of like a place where I keep, things that help the system. We've got CRUD generation, which is quite neat. So it'll generate bootstrap forms and data table grids and things for you. Let's have a look at some of the API stuff. All you need to have is just you can create a file, any name file inside your API or roots folder. So these roots folder and the API folders behave in the same way. API is just merely for naming purposes. And then you can go and create a root. So we can make a simple get root. This type of style of routing, I've noticed even after writing these myself, wasn't really looking at the other frameworks. I noticed that everybody seems to use a similar methodology or style. I'm going to make an endpoint here, API test, and this is my anonymous function. There's one thing that we do require with this is that we must have some type of response. Okay, so over here, I'm just going to return the response. And I'm going to say again, hello world. Okay, so my expectation now is if I go to API test over here, I'm going to have an endpoint that works. Okay, something is wrong. What have I done?
You didn't name your response variable in your function.
I didn't. Yeah, I think this is just
just type into it.
There we go. Great. That's why you need an IDE. Hey, cause you to get your things done. Thanks very much. Okay, so let's try this again. And there we've got an endpoint. Now, this doesn't mean much because essentially, well, all I'm doing is outputting text on the screen. Let's just have a look at a few examples here. Let's say we had a little person over here, and this person is just an array of data, and we had first name. I'm going to put my name in over there, and we've got my email, andre@test.com, and we respond with this array. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so you must see I'm a bit of a lazy programmer. So what TNet4 is doing then is taking this and JSON encoding it for me. So essentially, you can throw stuff at her. She tries to work out what you're trying to do, your responses and things like that. You can actually specify. So right now, I'm going to just do one other little trick here. Just show you something where I'm going to try and change this into XML. So there's a XML output, and I haven't really written much code over here. One of the things with APIs, though, is other people need to use your APIs, or you need to use your APIs, and that's one of the bugbears that I had is Swagger annotation is obviously very, very neat, and it's great for people to see and have a look at your APIs. The bugger for me is when you have to write the annotations for the Swagger API just to get across what you're trying to do over here. So that is something that I also spent a little bit of time on. Let's going to give this a hello world description, and let's put your tags, PHP meetup group. So I'm annotating now this REST endpoint. Oh, by the way, the Swagger URL is built in. So Swagger is generated on the fly. So this annotations that I did over there has resulted in us having a PHP meetup group tag over here, and I have the ability to go and test this out. So obviously my debugging running over here, and there you can see the lovely XML response, which we can flip back to JSON if we need to. But I'm hoping this is giving you guys a little bit of an idea of how quickly you can actually get things up and running. There's a lot of other parts that I could probably spend the better part of an hour. I just don't know, Nick, how much time I have here, but I mean, there's definitely some other interesting things that I could go into. Authentication being one of them, you know, locking down this endpoint. What I probably didn't say right on the offset, the moment you ran Tina, is she actually created private and public keys for you, which you can actually use for JWT signing and things like that. So it's built in. Essentially, if I go back to that router and I secure it, essentially what happens now is it becomes a secure endpoint. And as you can see, I've got this forbidden response. This is useful for cross-site forgeries and things like that, because all the requests that I've been sending and things like that, even if I had to do a post over here, is actually running through the authentication mechanism that Tina4 has. And you can actually control that yourself to validate tokens and things like that, but it's built in. Essentially, what I'd have to do now is I'd have to generate a token and then shove it into the authorization mechanism here. I know that's not a token, but just to show you what will happen if I now happen to execute this, I just want to check if that's going through. What I'm expecting to happen is that token is sent along with the call request. So something, I'm not sure why that's not functioning now, but that's generally what happens, whether there's a refresh needed or something. Yeah. So essentially these endpoints then are secured with JWT tokens, which you can then create payloads with, and then authenticate your forms. Part of the Twig templates and things like that is you can actually, I just want to go back to that index that we're busy with. You can actually embed your form key for use with your inputs. So if you're worried about, you know, how am I going to make sure my stuff's secure, and, you know, how these things are going to, form key actually creates, should be able to show you here, a hidden input inside your Twig template. And that then you use inside your forms to create your post requests and things like that. I think there's one more thing that I'd like to show you guys, which is more of I would say it's a little plaything or something that I've been fiddling around with. You might like it, you might not like it. It's basically what's it, object-oriented HTML. So if you can think of HTML as being object-oriented, and here I'm writing a little bit of it. The reason for this was simply because when you're working inside a browser without a nice IDE, you forget to close tags, and that becomes a mission. There's other problem, escaping, you know, PHP HTML code the whole time, you know, from PHP tags to HTML back again becomes a bit of a frustration. So this was a little proof of concept that came up. I use it in my tool development or tool generation. Anywhere where I must generate things, I'm using it there. I'm just going to see if we can get something running over here. Your attributes of your tags are basically put in an array. So if this was, let's do a title, and then we can do a body maybe with an attribute, and then the things that go inside your element, like your text, are put inside the brackets. So in other words, this is a header inside the HTML, and then I'm going to add a body. And let's make an H1 tag, and I'm just going to say hello world again. And we can put maybe a style attribute over here of, let's make the color blue. So that's a little example of some HTML. Notice what I've done is I've just removed the echo statement of Tina4, and hopefully I'm going to get exactly what I expect. So this is just a little way to generate some HTML. What about the language? We're probably missing that over here. Let's add that in. So essentially you end up with an object which you can then manipulate and template. So if you're thinking of coding templates for HTML, this might be something that you might want to play around with. But at this point, yeah, there's mixed reception. I mean, it's like, why would you want to do this if you've got, you know, your lovely HTML code? Well, the one thing I can say is that this is less code. So going back to the premise of writing less code and having something that you can actually make sure, you know, is debuggable. I mean, if I leave out a tag over here, it's going to crash the engine. So, you know, this is just something that I've been playing with. But yeah, that's basically it all from my side. I mean, if you want to get involved on the project, I mean, hit me up. I can easily give out my email address, or go and have a look at the actual framework, if you want to call it that. See what's happening. I think the best place to get hold of things will be on GitHub, and have a look at you know what we're busy with, or what's it. I'm not going to sign in now, sorry. But see if there's something in here that appeals to you, and if it's something that you would like to work with. But again, there's no real opinions here. We're just trying to make something that's fun for everyone to use, and we're trying to really streamline the development cycle, and then apply best practice to everything. And in the meantime, while doing that, we're learning as we go on. And I think that's the essence of it. You need to enjoy, you know, working in the language that you're working in. That's basically it from my side, Nick. I don't know if hand back to you. Anyone wants to ask anything? I've tried to really.
I got a question or two.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, yeah, great labor of love. I can see that. And I remember when we were chatting, you mentioned you've been at this for quite a while. And I liked the authentication bits. I was curious. Can you give a high level of like how you built this HTML tag thing?
Oh,
the
yeah.
Object-oriented HTML.
Yeah, let's go. So the cool thing is with TINA 4 is obviously the code is available like every other library, but I'm really, there's a little folder inside the framework, TINA 4, you can't miss it. If you have a look at the library itself, that's the whole library. Okay. And it does a lot of things. I mean, I haven't even gone into the ORM or the database abstractions and things like that. So what I've got here is a very simple piece of code which does this object-oriented thing. Now, this has obviously been refined a few times. So I mean, you know, it's a bit of interesting, but the joy of this was recursiveness, popping things into each other and then working out how to render, you know, the tags properly. So everything in TINA 4, I think, is in a state of being accessible for any programmer to just jump in and then like say, oh, I see how the any, you know, route is working, you know. Not to jump off the HTML element, is there anything specific you would like to ask for this? I actually wrote a little dynamic code generator to output the methods for this. And those methods, the one irritation was to try and get this out of the namespace, because you guys know you start working within a namespace, that you can't just call them, you know, from wherever. And I ended up shoving them into my constants folder with all the tags generated. So essentially that was the hack, you know, to get these things in there. So yeah, anything else, Nick? Does that answer your questions, or do you want to go into the code itself?
Yeah, roughly. I'll be diving into it at some point.
Look, I don't know if this is something that you really want to, you know, I mean, I just some of the stuff is just neat, you know, to output a little, like I've done a lot of CRUD work to output bootstrap forms and things like that. And I find it very neat to do it like this, so that I don't have to go escaping off to HTML and having a template or something for it. Yeah.
Okay. And I can't remember if you said it now as well, but how long have you been working on this again?
Yeah, I don't know if that's so good to advertise. Well, if I look at day one, this was probably 2002, maybe. So
Hectic.
so I would say, look, I mean, if you look at the context, you're looking at someone who's been working in Delphi and compiling stuff, and then having to, everyone says web apps now are the thing to do. So you go and say, what language do I get stuck in on, to do web apps? And to be honest, the reason why I got stuck in on PHP was that Perl didn't want to run on my Red Hat. So I ended up with PHP, which I was working with. So fortunately for me, I think Perl didn't want to run. So I hope there's no real Perl users out there who's like hating me right now. But the reason I'm on PHP is because I couldn't get Perl to work. Yeah.
Great. We see we have two questions here. Do you have the chat open, or should I read them to you?
Yeah, let me see. Are you looking at plugin? Oh, plugins. Yeah, plugins are actually in. And wow, I don't know if I must open that can of worms, but modules are, yeah, let me open that up. I hope it's going to just be but I can answer that. So the answer is yes on that one about plugins or modules. I call them modules, okay? And a module is actually something quite easy to build in Tina 4. And then it literally exposes all the stuff you have in your module in the same way that you wrote your Tina 4 code. So if you have a project that's working really nicely written in the Tina 4 framework, what you do is you go and change your index file and you just declare a module. You just say, oh, this is a Tina 4 module now. And that literally then can be injected in as a composer library into any of your other projects that you're working with. Obviously, routing and things like that have to be specific. Otherwise, you might end up overwriting, or overriding somebody else's stuff. But I think this is something that you can easily do and then have a look at. Even your classes and your ORM objects basically extend to whatever you injected in. So this is something that I'm quite excited to get tested and see, put it through its paces, because I've already built a CMS. So I'm hoping to launch that out soon as part of the extra packages, if you want, that's going to go with the framework. Yeah. And then inspiring frameworks, definitely the Slim framework. I found that was something that I was definitely inspired by, and actually had to still use it today on some of my projects, because it was a framework where I could literally plug in what I needed, and it was nothing more, nothing less. There was a few things that I felt that needed to be in that I wanted, and hence Tina 4, I started taking my code and putting it together in something. I think the biggest thing that I've added on top of Tina 4 right now has been the routing. That was the one missing thing that I didn't have in the beginning with all the code that I've been writing. Okay, Jacques asking about service workers and queues. Yeah, that's a whole other. I mean, we could do a PHP group just on the service workers and things like that. So yeah, they exist. You can have long running services, as we call them. I don't know if it's still running over here. No memory leaks. That was the most important thing for me with this, is that when you have a service running, it's not causing memory issues on the server. Actually, hot swappable as well. So you've in development mode, you've got the ability, if your debugger's on, you basically, this will just click open over here. Is that the Windows issue or so you basically extend the process, and you have two methods: whether this thing can run and what is it going to run. And that's that. And then you spin up the Tina 4 service runner on your server, and it will execute this thing faithfully until you tell it to stop. So yeah, hope that answers that. Yeah, queues are something I don't know. I'm going to need help with all of the things I want to put in. So I mean, if someone's got a good idea about how queues should run and a nice way to make it simple, that's definitely I'm definitely up for that. I believe this service runner thing is going to be a good part of that, but there's a lot involved when it comes to queues to do it properly. Any other questions?
Looks like it's it for now. There's one other one I had. You mentioned you need some help, and we've developed this. How many contributors have you had, like over the years, or how many do you have right now?
So mainly it's generally the people I work with, because yeah, I might start something and say, oh, by the way, I've written it in Tina 4, and everyone's like, what's Tina 4? So people are sort of added onto the Tina 4 framework, whether they like it or not, because I say, well, I need help on this. It's PHP. You should know how to code PHP. So these are the basics. Dive in. So there's been about 5 or 6 contributors over the years who've added, a database library here or a little bit of code there. But I'm encouraging my current team to, just to keep, if they find bugs, fix them and submit it as a pull request. And then I have a look at it and I see if it fits, and if it works. So anyone who can fork the project can be part of it. And that's my encouragement, is if there's no animosity. I'm not the guy like rejects code just because it doesn't look the right way. I've been on open source projects where because my line endings weren't right or some spacing wasn't right, it's like, no, we're going to reject your pull request. But that's not what this is. And you send your pull request through with what you fixed. I'll have a look at it. We'll even do a review. I can invite you to the Tina 4 Slack group. So I've got a little Slack channel where I've got a number of advisors. Really appreciate, the energy that people, just to give advice about how things should work. And I must say kudos to Tim. He was one of the guys who had a look at this probably a year ago and then said, yeah, keep going. It doesn't look too bad. I'm not going to use it, but maybe for a small project, I might have a look at it, and that's fine. I think it's going to have a place somewhere. You've seen some of the things it can do really fast. I mean, maybe it's a prototyping tool, which you then turn into a bigger framework or something like that. But I definitely think it's a fun place to learn. Maybe even just for the guys who feel they're a bit more junior or intermediates, this is a great place for you to come and get involved with open source. I would say get your open source career, your track record going. I'm thinking of things like OpenDuck, where you actually track your progress. And I'm quite happy to give credits or kudos where it is, and then you can start building your open source track record.
Amazing. Yeah. Definitely a good opportunity, I would say.
Off the topic question, yeah, the ladies. Okay, the ladies. Okay, so I'm really enjoying. I've actually got a manga teacher that I'm doing a manga illustration thing in with the Japanese manga artist. So and my idea is to actually have all the documentation and everything for Tina 4 in a manga style cartoon. And I definitely want to have really good looking ladies, because I think that appeals to the guys. And I mean, for the girls as well, it doesn't have to be exclusive, but I mean, the thing is, I think if your framework looks sexy, people are going to want to use it. So yeah. And the names of the girls are definitely to do with what their roles are. So it might even end up aliasing code, to specify the roles. This is just to show you guys here the Tina 4 profile. So part of doing your manga art is you have to create your profiles for your characters. So there's her profile. And then I've done Maggie, which is migrations. I didn't even mention migrations. I've got migrations in this framework as well. You can actually create migrations and things. So Maggie is in charge of migrations. I mean, hey, you would want her running your migrations for you. She looks like she can do a pretty good job. Yeah.
Great stuff. So you all do it yourself as well. It's quite the polymath going on here.
Yeah, I think it's just taking different interests that I have, putting them together into one thing. It doesn't get boring, but it's open to everyone. I do say that, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I think that wraps up all the questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That's what
Yeah,
I've said.
thanks. Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks, Nick. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I mean, and yeah, I mean, I think in another 3 or 4 months' time, it might be time for a reinvite or something just to see where we're at. And then
Sure.
hopefully there's going to be a whole lot of other people who's joined the the crazy manga framework. Yeah.
Can only see where it goes from here. Cool.
Great. Am I on?
Yeah. Ready whenever you are.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, thanks, Andrew. That was really cool to take a look at that. Super impressive. I personally would love to go take a look at that, the Tina 4 vendor file there, and see how everything's done. Yeah, I'm much less accomplished a developer, so for me, it would be really cool to learn that. So, hi everyone. I'm just going to quickly share my screen, and then we can get started. So, hop on the desktop. Okay, there's the chat, and start this guy up. Okay. Cool. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at getting started with PestPHP. So thank you for sticking around for my little part of this talk. It's going to be quite short and sweet, but it is something that I've been having a lot of joy with, is learning this new test framework called PestPHP. So I thought, hey, it's a good opportunity to share it with you guys. So I'm Jason. I am a dev in Durban, actually. So I'm not a Cape Townian, although hopefully soon my wife and I will make the plunge back that side.
You can't now. You're one of us now.
Oh no, no, but I love Cape Town. So I'm maybe a little bit selfishly, but I'm kind of glad that some of these things are remote so that I can be a part of these things for a little while longer. It's very, very cool. So I'm a self-taught developer. I was an IT teacher, and thanks to kids continuously nagging me about learning how to code and being better at it, I learned how to code myself, and then ended up loving it so much that I quit teaching and got into IT for a while, but then finally made my way into becoming a full-time developer. So I currently work at a company called Advantage Learning Technologies, which is an edtech company. We mostly focus on online learning for high school students, but yeah, recently we've been really digging deep into technology. We got really good at building learning management solutions for other organizations. So we do that for various companies and also for ourselves, which has been a lot of fun. Cool. So yeah, topic of this talk, PestPHP. So what is it? In a nutshell, it's a wrapper on top of PHP unit with the main purpose of making it simpler to read and write PHP unit tests. It does, and every time a new release comes out, I see they're adding some really, really cool things. But at its core, it's your PHP unit tests would run perfectly fine in Pest. It's just a layer on top of that, trying to make it as clean and simple as possible. And throughout this talk, I'm going to be hopping quite a bit into the code and then back. So hopefully you'll have a pretty good idea soon of what that means, what it looks like. And I'd be really interested to hear on your perspective of this thing, whether you feel like it's something worth looking into. I know that recently the creator actually put out a proposal suggesting that it become the default test runner for Laravel. And that got a lot of very passionate arguments for and against. So it's definitely been an argument in the community. It did get shot down in the end, so I don't think it's going to be the default test runner, but it is at that point where people are discussing it, whether that should be the case. So yeah, we started using it about, I would say 4 months ago when building a new Greenfield LMS. Our previous LMS had gotten to a point where there was quite a bit of technical debt, quite a bit of performance issues, and we wanted to start right using Laravel and Vue.js in the front end with proper testing in place and just like getting it right from the outset, whereas the older one had kind of been built ad hoc over the years. You know how these things go. So we decided the time had come for a bit of an upgrade. And yeah, PestPHP was, I don't even think it was version 1 yet when I read an article on it, decided on over a weekend, let me give it a shot, installed it, loved it, thought this was great, did a PR to the team saying, hey guys, can we try this? That got approved. got a cool team. And now all of our tests are written in Pest. So these are, I think there are other features for it really, but these for us were the main kind of things. The first one is the beautiful informative test reporting. So I'm actually going to swap over to code and I will show you what happens there. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to quickly break something so that we can see an error. So I'll just take out an S in lessons or something like that. And if I was running on PHP 8, I could say PHP artisan test, and it would just do its thing. But I'm on Laravel 7, so I've got to do it the old-fashioned way, then the test. And it'll then start running through all my tests. So this isn't doing anything functionally different to PHP unit. It's just formatting it in a way that's a lot more readable, a lot cleaner, and we find it a lot easier to kind of understand what's going on with our tests. So yeah, it tells you each one of the files that's being tested. It tells you what kind of test descriptions we've added to that so we can see exactly what's going on. And when it does hit a failure, which it will eventually, it'll be pretty clear like where that failure is coming. And it's going to do a decent job of giving me some feedback on that error. So I can see there in the lesson test, the specific test has failed is that the admin can view the index page and search lessons, which makes sense because I broke that API call. Cool, it's almost at the end of the test, and then I'll show you what the error reporting looks like here. Like 2 more. Oh, this one always takes a while because it's actually hitting a remote API. There we go. Okay, cool. So I can see that it tells me the file. It tells me the specific test. This is a bit of a simple output, but you'll see like with Pest, if you're doing more data related tests, it tries to be very clear about what is wrong. It says, this is the data you expected. This is the data that was returned. And then it tries to be as helpful as it can in telling you exactly where that error occurred. This is just a simple typo, so there's not really much to say other than I tried to get this path and I couldn't get it. But that alone is super, super helpful. So I've added on another branch there, another 30 or 40 tests. And once you start getting like hundreds of tests, having this kind of reporting is really helpful. You know, PHP unit, we just had a whole bunch of white dots and then we could figure it out when it finished, what went wrong. But being able to look through an entire report and seeing where the X's are really makes it fairly clear in the outset what's gone wrong. Cool, the other two are kind of together. So less boilerplate and easier to read and write. So if I open up, this is probably a good example, the insights test. This is everything that I need to be able to run a test. I have a description and I can either use the its keyword or the test keyword. If you've ever tested in a language like for JavaScript Mocha or Jest, it's very, very similar the way that the assertions work here. And I can use some higher order functions just to kind of keep chaining on methods as I go. I wouldn't normally do that. I would probably normally pass in a closure, you know, have a function and write my tests in there. But it is nice that you can do some higher order testing. And what's really nice about this, and it might seem like a bit of like a micro optimization, but not having to worry about you know, setting up a class and setting up your namespaces. And you know, I know I have to, when I do PHP unit, I put the comment with the @test above it so that I don't have to use test in the name of the method, like all that kind of weird quirks, which are fine, they work. But when you're testing, you really want to get into this mindset of, okay, let me write out the things that I want to check for, and then let me get writing with my tests. And all of that like extra stuff on top of it slows that process down quite a bit. And Pest does a really good job of allowing you to focus on what's important. That is, let me see if this app behaves in the way I'm expecting it to behave. It does that by reducing the boilerplate and making it super readable. The final thing which we found really helpful is you can progressively adopt it. So I'm going to just now go through a demo application of in which I'll convert PHP unit to Pest, but you can do that over time. Like you can install Pest and run your tests as they are, and you'll get the benefit of the much like more formatted, prettier error reporting. And then you can slowly build your way up to a point where everything's pestified and and all the boilerplate's been removed. So you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it slowly over time. And that's pretty helpful when you're, saying to your team, hey, let's adopt this new technology. You don't have to dive in with both feet. You can just do little bits at a time. And if for some reason it doesn't work out for you, you can swap back over to PHP unit and carry on as you were. Okay, cool. I've said a lot of words, so I just want to quickly check, are there any questions yet before I move on? So, and that guy. No questions. Okay, cool, great. All right, so installation of this is fairly simple. You do need PHP unit 9 or greater, and collision 5. So collision is, as you probably know, is the reporting kind of package built by the same guy who built PestPHP, Nana Maduro, and it's what allows you to get those nicely formatted errors. You then need to install PestPHP itself. And if on Laravel, there is a plugin which will give you some artisan commands. And I think it also gives you a couple Laravel specific assertions. Not sure about that, but it definitely gives you some artisan commands to make a few things easier. Something I think I forgot to mention earlier, Pest isn't Laravel specific. We have used it on a WordPress plugin before. I know Andre mentioned that he was actually, before this talk, he looked at using it.
Actually tested it. I mean, I obviously don't know the syntax yet, but I mean, that's what you're showing us. It definitely feels like something that should be in Tina 4. So yeah, because I'm using
Awesome.
Codeception at the moment, and I mean, one of the things we struggle with is just those, how to actually just get started writing tests, which this might, help with that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm still like fairly new to Laravel and PHP. I came from more of a JavaScript background before this, and JavaScript and Python. So testing for me at first was a little bit overwhelming, and I found this was way easier. I put my PHP tag, I write my tests. Like I don't have any weird quirks to worry about. I can get straight into it, which is really, really nice. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of live coding now. I want to take some existing PHP unit tests, convert them to Pest, and then show you a couple of the things that Pest allows you to do, which is quite cool. So I've got an application over here. It's an old wiki app, which we never ended up completing, but we do have some tests there. So here I've got an articles test with 3 PHP unit tests. I've got a collection test and a releases test. So those are all different models that existed on this wiki app. So if I go look at my composer, and I go to my dev, I see I've got the things that are required there. I've got my collision dependency, I've got my PHP unit, and here is my PestPHP pest package, as well as the Laravel plugin. Okay, so all I would need to do to install this at this point is run artisan pest install. And it's going to create 2 files, which I'm going to look at now. He's quite thirsty for GitHub stars, it seems, but I've already given him a GitHub star, so I'm going to clear that out. And let me go through some of these files that have been created. So the first one, this pest file is where you set up a lot of the boilerplate that you would normally have inside your test files itself. So for example, here I'm using the whole test case, which is the same as you have in PHP unit with all the assertions and all of that. And yeah, and setting up the application. So I'm saying that that's going to be used in the feature folder. I have a unit folder as well. So I'm going to come there and put in units. And another one that I probably want to use quite often is the refresh database trait. So let me add that. So by adding it here in the pest file, it's going to automatically use that in every file that's inside the folders that I specify. And I can name them differently. In our LMS app, I think we've got other namespacing for these because we've got JavaScript and PHP tests. So I've put like PHP/feature, PHP/unit. You can change it up. It really is quite flexible, but it's just the folder that you're specifically targeting that you want to use these classes in. Okay, the helpers file is just a file where you'd put anything that you're going to use across multiple tests that are specific to the context of your application. So I see they've got this assert example function over here. So in any test, I could pull that in and I could use that. PHP unit offers very similar functionality. So this is just a nice clean way of doing the same thing, where you've just got a list of functions, pull them into your files, use them as appropriate. Okay, just to show you, so for those of you who aren't familiar with PHP units, this is generally what you get when you run your tests. So you get something like this. I see I do have an error, which is intentional. I made one error. But at the top, I can see that I had 5 tests because there's 5 dots and I have 1 error. And then it does give you some error reporting here, so you can follow it along and figure out exactly where that error came from. But if I run the exact same test, pest, this will be a good way to see them both together. This is the pest version. So instead of having the dots, I can actually see the descriptions. And I'm not running pest tests. These are PHP unit tests, which it's clever enough to pass the method names into descriptions. So it does a whole lot of cool things like that, so that it's really an easy transition, because I could be done now. I've installed pest and cool, everything's working. I could just keep writing PHP units if all I wanted was this fancy reporting. I can see that it's trying to call this add tag method, and I've added a typo there intentionally just so that it would throw an error. Which I'm actually going to clear up now because I don't need that for the next part, yeah? So where's add tag? There we go. Okay, cool. If I run it again, there we go. I've got 6 passing tests now. Fantastic. So I'm going to take this article test, which is PHP unit test, and I'm going to side by side change it into a pest test. So before I do that, let me create a new file. Let's call it articles test pest, which is a terrible name, but just so that we have another file. Okay, cool. So I do have to start my PHP tags. And then what I generally do when I'm setting up tests in pest is I write out all of the descriptions of what I'm wanting to test in that particular model or whatever it is I'm doing. I generally like to write them out first. So I can either use the test name, or I can use it. I'm going to go for it here. I don't think there's functionally any difference between using the test or it name, except that when you use it, it actually appends the literal word it to the description in your reports. So if I write here, it has title, content, and a video, when I run this test, it'll actually say it has a title, content, and a video. Okay, so that's the first one. Got 2 more, so it can belong to a collection. And the final one is it can be tagged. Cool. Okay, so if you've worked with PHP unit and you've done lots of tests before, you've probably made quite a bit of use of the setup and teardown feature, well, the functionality, because it helps a lot to be able to write a bunch of tests, write a bunch of code before each test runs. And pest allows you to do a very similar thing. So because I see here, I'm creating articles, I'm creating collections and creating tags. I'm not sure how I would do this in reality, but just so that you can see how it works, I'm going to do a before each call, which is pest's version of setup, I believe it's called in PHP unit. And I've got to pass that a closure. And now I can put a whole bunch of this code in here. So I can set up an article factory. I'll format everything nicely just now. I can set up my collection. I can set up my tag. Okay, let's put collection beforehand so that we can also add the collection ID to the factory. Okay, and just put a semicolon. Okay, so this will all now run before each one of the tests occurs. So it's a little bit overkill because I don't need a collection and a tag inside the first test. So that's why I'm saying I wouldn't necessarily do this in reality, but just so you can see how it would work, this would help. For the first test, I don't need the context, so I can actually just append this directly to the end of my test. So it has a title, content, video. Well, the cert database has articles table that has this content, and that will work perfectly fine. These other ones, I do need the context so that I can get the collection and tag models. So I'm going to pass them closures. And this one's going to assert that the collection ID equals articles collection ID. I'll sort out I need to add this to all of the variables I'm adding up there, but I'll do that all at once. And I'll grab this code 2 and throw it in here. Okay, don't really need to assert the count and assert that it's true that it contains the tag. So I'm just going to add one of those. And now let's actually do this as well. I'll grab them all together and add this. So a little bit of setup, we're almost there. Okay, and then the article. Cool, okay. And that is all I need to do. And now my tests will work fine. So if I grab that file, so copy it to the clipboard, that's the file path, run vendor, then test with the name. It's now going to run through all of those tests. It tells me it has a title, content, video. So you see how the it adds to the beginning of the description, but everything worked out correctly. So yeah, kind of half the size of my test by doing it in Pest, but also I just find that when I'm working with it, that's what I just did is the general way that I work through my tests. I'll write out my descriptions, and then Pest makes it really easy to just pass a closure, assert what you want to assert, check your tests, all is working fine. Cool. There is another really cool tool, which I actually only saw while preparing for this talk. And this is Drift. This is an experimental feature that Pest has created. And its purpose is to automatically run through all of your PHP units tests and convert them to Pest tests automatically for you. Now, I tried it. It sort of works, but it's not amazing. But all you need to do to get going with it is you would install this PestPHP drift file, package. And inside your command line, you go vendor, bin, drift, migrate. And if you write tests, it'll actually go and do that. But if you want to first have a bit of a fail safe and see what it's going to do, you can add the show keyword. And what's then going to do is it'll go and format everything, but it'll show you what the output of that formatting is going to be inside your command line. I noticed that it does take a few seconds to do this. I can imagine if you had 100+ tests, this could take a while, but it is an interesting idea. There we go, it's finished. And if they can get this thing to look nice, it could be quite cool, because then converting to Pest would be install a couple packages, run drift, you're done. You've done the conversion, which is quite nice. So it shows me here what's been changed. I'm happy with that. Let me give it a run. So I'll just take out the show command. And it's now going to do exactly the same thing, but instead of doing it in the command line, it's actually going to literally take every one of my tests and try and convert it. So I'll let it do that. Yeah, I'd actually like to try this on like a app that has 100 tests and see how long it takes. But there we go. It does it. A couple of issues being that one, it has no space between things, which is not the prettiest to look at. And also all of this is unnecessary. It would work fine without that. I don't think it's reading from the PestPHP file to know what each file has already. But it's a work in progress, and it is a promising technology. If they can get that right, that would be really, really cool. So Pest has a whole bunch of other really cool things. It has data sets. So you can set up a datasets folder, and you can put a whole bunch of data there that you want to look at throughout your application. It has the ability to tag tests. So you can do something like this. You could say group, and then you can give it a name like, I don't know, integration or something. And then you could add a whole bunch of these group tags to different tests. And then inside your command line, when you run, you can do -- group and then give it the name, and it'll only run the tests that are tagged with that name. So that's super helpful. Like if you got tests that take a really long time to run, or if you've got a whole set of API tests, for example, across multiple different files, and you just want to run your API tests, they give you the ability to do that. You could also do cool things like saying only, which means that it'll only run that test inside the file, or skip, and then it will not run that test, but run all the other tests in the file, and so on and so forth. It's definitely worthwhile hopping onto PestPHP.com, taking a look at their docs. Every time I go look there, I see that they've added a new thing, a new cool little feature. So it's definitely quite a promising bit of technology. Cool. That is it from my side. So I don't know if there's any questions. I didn't look in a while, so I might have missed something.
One question from my side, Jason. Acceptance testing, because I'm using Codeception at the moment, and the simple reason was because I could do PHP unit tests and acceptance tests and whatever other tests you get, all in one library. But obviously they're wrapping a lot of stuff there as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
I actually want to see if they do have, so they do have quite a few plugins. I just wanted to see what they had there. They got a Faker plugin. They got a snapshots plugin, which isn't quite the same thing, but it is helpful in the sense that you can at least look at your snapshots. Yeah, I'm not sure if it would necessarily be the perfect use case for that, but yeah, it would definitely be worthwhile maybe looking through the docs and seeing if there is anything that could be used for that type of use case. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of acceptance testing myself. I mean, we've done quite a few feature tests. That's the main thing. And then we've done unit tests occasionally for really, really important models.
One of the things that I see, I mean, it's always difficult, like the headless browsers and things like that, to actually do proper testing. I mean, this is one of the things everyone says test-driven development, but how, do we really get to that discipline of being able to do the whole thing? That's obviously the holy grail of coding, is if you can have your coverage in a good space, and be able to test all these things, because often, man, it's horrible when something sneaks out, and you could have trapped it with a test, so yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been using Cypress a lot for that, because I mean our entire front end is JavaScript. So our PHP is actually just a bunch of API calls, really. It's effectively headless. So yeah, and Cypress has worked really well for that kind of use case. But I agree with you. It would be really nice if there was a tool that could do it all. But yeah, this has definitely been pretty helpful just for our PHP side.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Cypress, because I did comment in the chat earlier. Yeah, the output on that, aside from being pretty for PHP tests, reminds me a lot of Jest and Mocha tests, because they also output in a similar fashion. You're right.
100%, yeah.
You do all that.
Yeah. I think I think Nuno Maduro, the creator of this, has definitely tried to craft it as much after Mocha and Jest as possible. And we found that super, super helpful in our apps, because like if I'm doing an entire feature and I'm writing my JS test in Mocha and then my PHP test in Pest, I feel like I'm writing the same thing. Like I'm writing the same way, the same kind of thinking. And I found that super, super helpful.
Yeah. I'm definitely
Cool.
keen to give this a go.
Yeah, no, there's some cool stuff. I actually only discovered this today. There's a nice coverage thing. So I actually wonder if this will work. I'm actually now just out of curiosity, I want to see if this will do what it's supposed to do. So vendor and pest -- coverage. I do have Xdebug on this machine. Okay, no. What's happening? The class test says, I don't know. Who knows? Oh, I think that's because I ran Dusk, and Dusk has broken a bunch of things. Yes, that's exactly what's happened here.
And John in the chat wants to tell us Dusk for the win, but Dusk is breaking everything. So where are you now, John?
Okay, there we go. That should work now. Let's see. Nope. Okay, I'm over it. I know that this is because I ran Drift, and Drift just breaks everything at the moment. So if I cleared everything out and took it back to a default state, this coverage would probably work. But I actually can't run any tests now after running Drift. So fair warning, be careful when you use that tool. I think it should probably be a little bit further in its development before using it. I mean, I guess they do put a warning in the very first part of the docs, so fair enough. Cool. Okay, well, yeah, that's all from my side.
Great. Well, thank you both. Great talks tonight.
Cool, thanks for having us.
Enjoy your evening.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for everything.
So, to the audience, if you're not on ZA Tech, please join ZA Tech. That's where all of this happens, where most of the community is. zatech.co.za. If you'd like to give a talk, I put a link to the Google form in the description. So fill that out or ping me. I'm not actually Jonathan Bossinger. He donated his Zoom account for the meeting generously. I'm Nick. So tag Nick or tag John Bossinger on ZA Tech, and we will get back to you and help you out with the talk. So yeah, that's it from us. So peace.
Sweet. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Cool. That